Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。The second round of trade talks between China and the US wrapped up this week, with Donald Trump proclaiming, in all caps, that the deal is done, the relationship is excellent, and that China has promised to give full magnets and any necessary rare earths. But, as usual, his estimates of the meeting are off, with the Chinese side seeing things completely differently. I'll get into that today and also talk about Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent rushing off from the London talks to testify before Congress, where he made some interesting remarks that show exactly what his attitude towards prosperity in China is when he's under oath, regardless of how nice he acts otherwise. Today we'll go beyond the propaganda. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. Just last week, US President Donald Trump had his wish come true when Chinese President Xi Jinping finally agreed to grant him the phone call he'd been dreaming of since he resumed office earlier this year. Now, you guys will recall just how desperate Trump and his administration got, especially following his April 2 tariff scam, for a phone call with his idol, President Xi. Honestly, even I felt embarrassed for the man as he publicly pined away from rejection, with his biggest dream being a moment of the chairman's time. On June 4 at 2:17 a.m., Trump posted from the White House, "I like President Xi of China, always have and always will, but he is very tough and extremely hard to make a deal with." Well, it seems that Beijing felt Trump had embarrassed himself enough, realizing his wish last week when he was finally granted an audience with President Xi in a phone call that he says lasted 90 minutes. Straight afterward, Trump rushed to social media to share his excitement with the world, in much the same way Instagram users do when they receive a like from their favorite influencers. "OMG, President Xi invited the First Lady and me to visit China," Trump gushed on social media. Okay, I added the OMG part. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, played it cool, recalibrating the direction of the giant ship of China-US relations requires us to take the helm and set the right course. And that call apparently led to the two sides meeting in London this week for their first official trade talks since agreeing to work together in Geneva last month. After talking for 2 days, Trump gushed again on social media, proclaiming that the deal was done. Now, I'll tell you very shortly why that is not true, but let's read his post, which was, again, all in caps. "Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval from President Xi and me. Full magnets and any necessary rare earths will be supplied upfront by China. Likewise, we will provide to China what was agreed to, including Chinese students using our colleges and universities, which has always been good with me. We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Relationship is excellent. Thank you for your attention to this matter." So, according to Trump, the deal is done. Talks are over. That's it. But, shock horror, that's not at all what was agreed to, according to the information released by China. Basically, China says that a mechanism for communication has been agreed on, so that there can be more consensus and less misunderstanding. Ironically, Trump has shown with his social media post that the misunderstanding part hasn't quite worked out. Global Times reported on the Commerce Ministry's press briefing about the London meeting, saying, "Spokesperson He Yadong said that the two sides reached principled agreement on implementing the important consensus reached by the two heads of state during their phone call on June 5, and the framework of measures to consolidate the outcomes of the economic and trade talks in Geneva, and made new progress in addressing each other's economic and trade concerns. Moving forward, both sides will further leverage the China-US trade consultation mechanism, continue to maintain communication and dialogue, enhance consensus, reduce misunderstandings, strengthen cooperation, and jointly promote the stable and sustained development of China-US economic and trade relations," He said. So definitely not the done deal that Trump was suggesting, and more of a work in progress. On the question of rare earths, which Trump claimed would be supplied to the US, China's stance was also contrary to Trump's claims. Global Times continues. In responding to the question about the rare earth issue, He said that as a responsible major country, China fully considers the reasonable demands and concerns of other countries in civilian applications. China reviews export license applications for rare earth-related items in accordance with laws and regulations, has already approved a certain number of compliant applications, and will continue to strengthen the approval process for compliant applications, the spokesperson said. So as you can see, all China is doing regarding rare earth exports is promising to continue supplying those elements based on its current export mechanism. Perhaps if you read between the lines, China will speed up approval for critical industries, ensuring US manufacturing that requires those elements doesn't completely shut down, as was looking to be the case very soon. But it is definitely not a done deal and probably includes a 6-month time limit so that China can review the situation later when the US side inevitably starts attacking China from left, right and centre again, as Scott Bessent already did less than 24 hours after the London meetings ended. Let's take a quick look at his shocking statements while under oath in Washington, D.C.
China currently has the most imbalanced economy in the history of the world. They now have an approximate 30% share of global manufacturing, and they continually grow their manufacturing base. They cannot be allowed to export their way back to prosperity.
Wow, he basically said that China is an extremely popular producer and exporter of goods, making up 30% of the world's production, and that they need to be stopped from doing that. He said they cannot be allowed to export their way back to prosperity, which I really need to unpack. First of all, who the heck are you, Bessent? Isn't the US a major proponent of free trade? Isn't that one of the major tenets of the model of capitalism you love so much? Or was that only the case when the US was able to monopolize the system with bullying and control of the global reserve currency? Now that the world is diversifying with China and not the US now the #1 trade partner with most of the world, you don't care about free trade and capitalism anymore. Sir, you need to sit down. If China is able to make products that the world wants to buy, then isn't that a sign of a well-functioning global economy with free trade and competition at its core? Secondly, the US was completely happy for China to take over manufacturing on its behalf 4 decades ago as Americans became more prosperous and didn't want to work in factories anymore. The US was completely happy to export its pollution and create a cleaner environment for ordinary Americans by moving production and its pollution to China. But now that China has returned to a position of strength after its century of humiliation at the hands of exploitative former powers, the US no longer wants to play that game. Now that Chinese people eat more calories, fresh fruit and vegetables, and meat than many first world countries, the US no longer wants to play that game. Now that China leads the world in green technology, electric vehicles, and clean energy, the US no longer wants to play that game. Well, Mr. Bessent, and with the utmost respect, go kick rocks, sir. You do not hold the power to unilaterally stop China's development, cease the increasing standard of life for the 1.4 billion people of this country. You need to sit down and realize that the US is now returning to its place in a more diverse, more fair world, and that is as a large regional player. Your dominance of the world and of world affairs is over, and your hideous God complex with it. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Were you surprised by Bessent's hideous comments just hours after the meetings in London? And why do you think American politicians are so delusional? Do let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.